Good morning, everyone. Please remain standing for praise by my chaplain, Reverend Martin Freeman, before we start the meeting.
Let us pray. Unless the Lord build a house, those who labor in vain. Unless the Lord watch over the city, the watchmen stay awake in vain. And so, Almighty God, we thank you, Lord, for your sons and daughters whom you called today to lead and to guide and shape this country. We pray, O Lord, that thou will give us wisdom and understanding. Thou will give us courage to make decisions that will affect your children, but yet will bring benefit to all your children. Lord, we pray for the mayor and the chief executive and all those whose decisions will make our lives better for ourselves and for our children. We ask this through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Well, I'd like to remind you that this council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so we're all on camera. Be aware that you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. There's no need for members to stand. Cameras are focused on people sitting down. And remember to speak clearly into your microphone, please. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting today, councillors, officers, members of the press and public, and anyone else who may be attending, and anybody watching via webcast. Please can all mobile phones be put on silent and any other noisy devices. If there is an emergency alarm, follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. If you have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, please, before we go to the vote. I will go straight to agenda item 1, which is attendance. The attendance register is going around the room. Please can all members sign it and send it on. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Richard, we've got any apologies today, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Bevan, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Burnett, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Curran, Councillor Gwynne Clark, Councillor Harnett, Councillor Alan Jones, Councillor Morby, Councillor Mills, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Members, any other apologies?
Can I just ask, have we got a police representative now? Because in those last couple of months, we haven't had anybody from the police come into the meetings.
There's nobody here today. There's nobody here today, but they are invited.
Thank you. Any apologies, members? No? Well, we go straight on to item number 3, which is declarations of interest. Monitoring officer, do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't have any advice for members today. I know you have the budget before you. I know some of you are community councillors, but the precept is set and there are just formal calculations in the budget. So no further advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any other interest to declare yourselves? Nope. Can you make sure that any interests are written on the normal form, please, going around? We go on to item number 4, which is the minutes, 26th of January 2016. Can someone move that the minutes are correct? Thank you. Have we all agreed? Yes? Thank you, members. The minutes are agreed. Now we go on to item number 5, which is update on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 19 of the agenda. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Harris?
Yes, just one on the last but one on page 19. It's one for the leader. It says on the 3rd of March 2015 that the outstanding action is to organise a presentation to members about Green Meadow Farm and why it was created and its benefits to the community. There's no date on that, and I wonder if the leader can cast any light as to when he intends to provide that presentation. Thank you.
Leader would like to answer.
Yeah, well, the officers can arrange a date for that.
Right, any other questions? No? Is everyone happy to note the updates? All right, thanks. Thank you, members. They noted. Item 6, which is receipt of petitions. There's no petitions for today, so we move straight into item number 7, which is public question time. There's no public questions today, so we go straight into item 8, announcements. Leader, do you have any announcements to make?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Mr. Mayor. On Monday, March the 14th, my good friend Dame Rosemary Butler, AM, the presiding officer at the Assembly, will be coming to the Council to speak at a members' seminar on Women in Public Life campaign.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Executive, any announcements to make?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We go on to agenda item 9, which is petition, report back, respite care. Sue Evans, Chief Social Officer, Care and Housing, can you make your, present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to highlight and remind members that we had a petition presented last June looking at the reduction in the number of respite care days offered to eligible clients. And the key thing I want to remind members is this was about reducing planned respite. There would always be provision for emergency respite put in place, and those changes didn't impact on that. So we received the petition in June 2003. We had 802 signatures on that petition, and we subsequently wrote to the petitioner on your behalf, and I'm highlighting here from page 23 to 25 the findings and the issues leading up to that decision. So if I take you to paragraph 5, you know that we've had to deliver a significant package of savings as a result of demographic pressures and the impact of poverty, demand increasing and the Council's resources reducing in real terms. And across the Council, during the current financial year, we needed to find over £6 million worth of savings. If I take you to 5.2, you can see that social care and housing had relative protection in terms of budget, but despite the relative protection, we still had to deliver a savings target of 2.6 million, and obviously that meant difficult decisions. At 5.3, I'm setting out there our rationale we use to determine protecting the front line in particular by looking at transforming the way we delivered services and reducing some of the management and administrative costs, so that we protected the front line. So you can see that this is set in the background of very challenging and difficult decisions that the Council has had to make over the last few years. So whilst we were conducting the review, if I take you to 5.6, of looking at individual service needs, obviously our priority is about safeguarding and supporting those with the highest level of need. And we took that difficult decision that we would reduce planned respite care in order to make sure that we ensured as many people as possible benefited from respite care. And as you can see at 5.7, when you look particularly at respite care for learning disabilities, we have 340 adults, and that's less than 15% of our current service users, the vast majority of whom receiving social care are older people. And only 20 have had a reduction in their planned respite provision. So, you know, a minimal impact, obviously difficult for those 20, but by working with their families and carers, we've successfully put in place that planned reduction. But if there is any crisis or emergency, obviously additional respite would be provided to ensure safeguarding. So those are the key elements, and all of those factors have been shared with the petitioners, so that they've had that information sent back to them. Happy to take any comments.
Thank you, Sue. Members, any questions or comments? No? The recommendation is on page 25 of your agenda. You are asked to note the petition and respond to it. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. Right, thank you, members. That's unanimous. Right, thank you, Sue. Right, we go straight on to item number 10 now, which is the Budget 2016-17 and Medium-Term Financial Plan. Assistant Chief Executive for Resources, can you please present your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In many ways, this budget, which is my 10th as Treasurer, is the same as we've seen in recent years, and in some ways it's very different. These are still extremely difficult times for the public sector and local government. The continued drive at a UK level for austerity shows little sign of abating, which consequently has an impact upon the Welsh Government's budgets and the choices they can make. My reading of the situation in England is that it is now becoming very difficult for English local government, with some even questioning the viability of some councils. In particular, in England, the reductions in social care are having an impact on the NHS as preventative services are reduced. And that's something in Wales that would run contrary to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. In Wales, the spectre of local government reform is still very much there and continues to be destabilising. In my opinion, the budget before you represents a bit of a watershed. Council in January agreed a new corporate plan with a much narrower set of priorities that recognise the difficult financial environment we are facing. The budget also, for the first time, agrees a set of mitigations in detail over 2 years. So effectively, we have a detailed plan for 2017-18, as well as a budget for 2016-17. And this all within the context of a 5-year medium-term financial plan, which stretches out to 2021. The discipline shown originally in identifying measures in anticipation of a more difficult settlement than actually transpired has allowed members of the Cabinet to recommend investing resource in their new priorities. A longer-term view is also essential in respect of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Before you today, you have a very detailed and long set of papers. You have the covering report, which then has 9 appendices, and the first of those is the budget book, which itself has 4 annexes. I'm going to start the detailed part of this introduction with the budget book report, which starts on page 39, and then I'll return to the covering report and the other appendices. On page 40, you have the background to the report. Within this section, I rehearse very briefly the difficult funding environment facing the public sector, the plethora of new legislation we continue to face, the fact that demand for services continues to rise, as well as reminding Council of the new Council priorities that were agreed at the last Council meeting, i.e. a clean and green Torfaen, raising educational attainment and support for Torfaen's most vulnerable residents. On page 43, the report then takes Council through the provisional revenue settlement, and in terms of the key points, a cash reduction at an all-Wales level of nearly 57 million, a like-for-like cash reduction for Torfaen of minus 1.7% or just over 2.2 million, the fact that the outcome agreement grant is now within the settlement, which will reduce bureaucracy, and in terms of capital, broadly static at an all-Wales level and only marginally reduced for Torfaen. Council tax also remains a matter for local authorities to determine. The level of detailed grant information, though within the settlement at an individual authority level, remains disappointing, which hopefully will be rectified when we get the final settlement. It was also disappointing that we only received a 1-year settlement from the Welsh Government and not a multi-year one. This does not make medium-term financial planning any easier for local government, and it is something that hopefully will be rectified in future years. The financial challenges we face are not unique to Torfaen. Councils across Wales are facing the same or similar difficult choices and will be setting challenging budgets. Unusually, the final settlement is not due to be formally received until tomorrow, the 2nd of March, and the final Welsh Government budget itself will not be debated and approved until the 8th of March. The proposals, therefore, within this report are based upon the provisional settlement that was received in December. We have been notified of the likely changes from provisional to final for Torfaen, and they're only very minor, just a little over £2,000, and therefore these budget proposals continue on the provisional settlement as they've been worked through all our reconciliations. And I confirmed with the Welsh Government that they would have no issue with that. It's unlikely that any further changes will happen, but with the Assembly's final budget debate being so late, it cannot totally be discounted. Rather than await the final budget, should that unlikely event happen and it have an impact on the local authority settlement, then this would have to be addressed through general balances, pending the identification of further in-year savings. This on the assumption that Council would, in any event, not wish to vary the Council tax that is assumed within these proposals. There has to be an acknowledgement that this settlement is better than we had been anticipating. We'd been anticipating -4%, and it is nice to see that the local government voice is being heard, especially in relation to social care and its consequent impact on health. However, it still represents another cash reduction following several previous years of cash reductions, and so I would best describe it as less worse. Other parts of the Welsh Government budget have seen better settlements than local government, particularly health. It is hoped, though, that this improved narrative can become the norm and the local government voice continues to be heard so that we receive settlements that allow us to properly protect frontline services. Section 6, page 45, then takes us through the service budget targets. 6.1 takes you through the initial targets that were established at the outset, which was -2% for social care and absorbing pressures and -10% for everyone else. Establishing such tough initial targets has ultimately led us to the relatively positive position in terms of process we are now in. 6.2 details the changes that Cabinet in December agreed to those targets, which essentially reduced the neighbourhood's greening and cleaning elements down to 2% and all other services down to 3.5% for 2016-17, largely as a result of corporate savings being developed, which I'll come to later. There are then two tables which basically highlight the service targets and the policy headroom, which arises largely from the settlement being better than expected for both 2016-17 and 17-18. On page 47, section 7, that's the section of the report that considers the mitigations for both years and the recommendations for joint scrutiny meetings. For 2017-18, we assumed a Welsh Government reduction of only originally -4%, but then we reduced that to -2.5%. As I've indicated earlier, I've got no forward indications from WAG, which makes that more difficult, but based upon the current settlement and the reading of the Welsh Government budget going forward, this seems a reasonable assumption to me. Of course, if the reduction is worse and Welsh Government protect other areas more significantly than is the case, then alternative and further savings will be required to ensure the financial plan for 17-18 remains balanced. In respect of the joint scrutiny process, I hope everyone would agree that the process this year, which covered 3 years, 16-17, 17-18 and 18-19, was much more detailed and engaging for members. All the savings measures identified were published and available for scrutiny. The first 2 meetings were run as workshops and all members were given an opportunity to quiz chief officers on the detail of savings. Members then came together for a 3rd session to formulate their recommendations. In respect of 16-17 and 17-18, there were some 23 proposals originally put forward which were not supported by the joint scrutiny meetings. A number of measures required further information. There were some specific suggestions in relation to cemetery fee increases and the taking of the PCSO savings, and also a view that further reductions should be evident in respect of the subsidy in relation to the community farm. The final proposals have not taken forward the majority of the proposals that joint scrutiny could not support. They accepted the recommendations in relation to cemetery fees and the saving in relation to PCSOs, and the mitigations in respect of 2017-18 were increased in respect of the community farm. In respect of the mitigations requiring further information, the most significant was in relation to the Gwent Music Support Service, and as there has been no opportunity for further scrutiny review, the proposed full saving is not being taken forward in 16-17, and the shortfall will be met initially from reserves. As I've indicated earlier, there are a number of corporate savings that assist with the service targets over the next 2 years. One was reducing the budget for the council tax reduction scheme by modelling numbers going forward. One was about the likelihood of the increase in council tax base as developments take place. The waste residual contract costing significantly less, and the development of a new operating model to remove duplication across the council, the first phase of which is in relation to the administration and business support review, which is well underway for 2016-17. That's a review about a new way of working that will both improve performance but also reduce back office cost to allow it to be invested in frontline services and increase efficiency. And the last is a development of an income strategy, some savings around procurement, a new way of managing transport and asset management, which we will need a real focus on. Obviously, any shortfall in these corporate targets would have a detrimental effect on the overall financial planning, therefore we need to drive them. Within Annex 1 on pages 59 to 64, you then have the detailed mitigation measures to achieve the savings for all service areas. And as I said earlier, for the first year we have detailed mitigations over 2 years. And as with the corporate ones, all chief officers will have to drive those forward. Section 8, page 49, is all about member policy choice. This has been possible because we set difficult initial targets, and all services show discipline in identifying savings to that worst case scenario, and also the introduction of the corporate savings. So I detail in 8.3 the policy choice that has been indicated to me: protecting schools with a cash increase of 1.85% after allowing for falling rolls, supporting the base increase costs within the local education authority to maintain school improvement, providing some resource to support the potential cost to social care of the impact of the national living wage in the care sector, reducing the impact of changes in respect of adult community learning and the reduction in the Families First grant funding, specific investment in keeping the borough cleaner and greener by supporting the new area-based approach, honouring the commitment with regards to payment of education workforce registration fees, introduction of the living wage to support our lowest paid employees. And then there is one about strengthening our financial resilience and underpinning support for the mitigation targets, recognising that this is a 2-year budget and some of them will take time to drive out, and therefore utilising all the resource in 1 year when you've got a 2-year budget would not be a prudent thing to do. And then finally, a council tax increase of 3.95% for 2016-17. Council tax is always difficult for members. That's the steer I was given. It's a lower increase than the current year. I've no doubt there'll be lower increases across Wales, but also there will be higher increases across Wales, and ours is unlikely to be significantly out of step. The table in paragraph 8.5 then brings forward that into the final position for 2016-17. To achieve the mitigations, both service and corporate, will have staffing implications. Once again, the Council, through a voluntary redundancy trawl, is trying to manage those implications in a sensitive manner to reduce the incidence of compulsory redundancy as far as possible. But given the cumulative impact of several years of austerity, there is every likelihood that there will be compulsory redundancies in 2016-17. The funding for both voluntary and compulsory redundancies will be from reserves via an approval report to the Deputy Leader, as is normal practice. The service and financial business cases will be at an aggregate level based on the fact that our approach is always linked back to the budget and the requirement to achieve base budget savings. We don't have a standalone severance scheme. If there was not a need to make savings, we would not have redundancies, voluntary or compulsory. Section 9 of the report on page 51 goes on to the medium-term financial plan, and the table in 9.2 indicates that we have at least another 12.6 million to address over the 3 years 18-19 to 2021, excluding schools. For this period, I've also assumed a reduction in Welsh Government support of 2.5% per annum. Section 10 highlights the risks. Section 11 details our reserves policy and the anticipated reserve levels both at the end of this financial year and the following years. The section also makes reference to the recent guidance issued by the Public Service Minister on the scrutiny of reserves. I've always tried to be open about the level of our reserves, and it's also always a feature of the budget and financial planning reports and features in most financial monitoring reports. I would therefore hope that members in Torfaen are clear on the reserves we hold or have the opportunity to access that information. There still remains, though, a lot of unhelpful commentary about the reserves being the answer to the financial times we're in. It's for each authority to be comfortable on its level of reserves, balanced against its risk appetite. Also, the 31st of March is a bit of an arbitrary date to make all judgments on. The level may be higher on that particular date, but fall very quickly in the following financial year, supporting redundancy costs, where the timing of staff leaving the organisation being one where that can be particularly difficult. Reserves are important in supporting change, whether that's Invest to Save, redundancy, change management costs. I would also draw your attention to the paragraph in 11.4, which reads that our general fund balance of 6.1 million as at March 15 only amounts to some 2.38% of our gross spending and would only provide 8 days spending power if used for general recurring spend, and our projections of reserves reduce. I think this puts into perspective, or whilst the absolute level of our reserves is significant and certainly would be to the general public, it is not in relation to our turnover. We're a £250 million organisation with a net spend in excess of 160 million. Section 12 of the report then details our capital programme, which again has 21st century schools ambitions, as well as some extra investment for highways in 2016-17. Turning now to the covering report, which starts on page 27. Section 6 of that report, on page 30, details the impact of the council tax increases for ourselves and the precepts from the Police and Crime Commissioner and community councils, and members can see from the tables the variations in increases. And the overall impact would be, on average, 3.87% for Torfaen as a whole. Section 7 and Appendix 4 takes you through the equality impact assessments. There are then 3 sections which are new this year in terms of their timing, in terms of this report, and contain the resources supporting plans, namely the workforce plan, asset management plan and the procurement strategy, which are also detailed in the appendices. This is the first time these detailed plans have been developed as part of the service and financial planning cycle and considered at the same time as the budget. The workforce plan and procurement strategy have already been considered by Cabinet. In respect of the workforce plan, the Council's ability to successfully deliver services and to deliver improvement is dependent upon a great extent on having the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. Elected members have previously identified that the development of a new workforce plan should be progressed as a priority. It's an important framework or point of reference within our consideration of people issues and should be seen within the context of the Council's corporate plan and medium-term financial plan. There are 6 key themes within there, and 8 initial work priorities have been agreed by Cabinet. You then have the Council's updated and revised asset management plan. In terms of the key points, managing the whole asset portfolio on a corporate-wide basis, clear on the responsibilities of all parties, and looking to optimise the portfolio and rationalise corporate accommodation, which builds on the move from County Hall and the police headquarters. And the asset management plan then sets a number of key activities that we'll be looking to deliver over the period of it. Reducing the number of leases, reducing the number of non-educational buildings, reducing our maintenance backlog, improving our occupancy on a 7 to 10 desk ratio, and refining our data management processes. You then have the procurement strategy, which is only there for you to note, Cabinet having agreed it, and the only point I would make is there remains a continual focus on procurement in the Welsh public sector. Section 11 then outlines the environment policy, and Section 12 details the Treasury management indicators. In terms of key messages, the continuation of a difficult funding environment for the public sector, a local government settlement which, whilst better than expected, still represents significant year-on-year like-for-like cash reductions, a budget that includes mitigations over 2 years, a budget which has allowed members of the Cabinet to exercise policy choice, and, as in previous years, budget mitigations that have been the subject of joint scrutiny, but for the first time based on a workshop-style approach, which was more engaging, and a council tax increase of 3.95%. The recommendations then are on page 34 and are in 4 parts. Approve the budget, the statutory recommendations in relation to budget requirement of council tax, approval of the supporting plans, and the Treasury management indicators. As is the case when the budget concludes, I'd always like to put on record some thanks. So to all my colleague chief officers and their teams for the support in once again developing the budget and financial plan for 17-18. It does get more challenging each and every year, so the support is always appreciated and has always been very much the way this council works. David Lilly and my finance colleagues, some of whom are sitting to my left, I wouldn't have a budget to present without their support and endeavour, or without the leadership that David personally provides across all aspects of financial management and standards for this Council. My other resources colleagues who've been instrumental in the supporting plans: Graham Russell for the workforce plan, Linda Willis with Dave and her colleagues for the asset management plan, and Andrew Maisie for procurement. Richard Edmonds and his colleagues in strategic services in terms of all the communications and public consultations, all the democratic stuff that has to be done, and the scrutiny teams. In respect of this latter point, I believe that the joint scrutiny process, as I've said earlier, did significantly improve again this year over previous years with the introduction of the workshop-style approach, which enhanced the challenge to the original budget mitigations. So my last thanks goes to all those colleagues instrumental in our scrutiny process, and particularly Lynn Williams. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be happy to take any questions after the Deputy Leader has spoken.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Hunt, would you like to respond, please?
I'd just like to start by thanking Nigel for the report and for all the officers and members who have contributed to the process over the past year. I primarily want to focus on what we're doing today and what we as a council can do to protect local services, rather than play a political blame game about who's responsible for cuts to public services, but I would like to set out some context to start with. The graph that's just appeared up on the overhead projector there shows the planned drop in public spending in this country during the decade as a proportion of our GDP. Now, this is a conscious decision which the UK government has taken. I'm not challenging their right to do that. They're democratically elected. But the chart shows our decline, I think we're the light green column, in spending, from being level with a country like Germany at the start of this decade, with its defined welfare state and well-funded health and local services, to a position by the end of the decade where we'll be level with the USA. And you have to remember in those figures that doesn't include things like a nationalised health service that they don't have in the States. So I just think that sets out some context and should perhaps influence us in two ways. Firstly, this should make us recognise that this is not a Torvine issue. Councils across the country are facing tough decisions. Secondly, though, it has to inform our expectations of what public services can realistically deliver if that is the future of their funding. It would be unrealistic of us to expect continental-style services for US-style investment. The Welsh Government's settlement for Torvine was minus 1.7%, or about £2.2 million less in cash, as Nigel just said. Whilst this is still a very challenging settlement, it at least represents an improvement on last year. If you'd have walked into this building 6 or 7 years ago and said we'd had almost 2% less cash than the previous year, I think people would have gone a bit white in the face. But it shows how far we've travelled, perhaps, across councils across the UK in dealing with straitened times. As we've planned prudently on a 4% cut, if we stick to the core of tough decisions proposed so far, we can invest in key priority areas. Firstly, I'd like to say we've tried to listen to members as part of the budget process this year. Thank you to all those who took part in the scrutiny process, to members and to Lynn Williams for such a productive and interesting session. We've tried to listen, and as the report says, at 7.1, we've taken forward 20 of the 23 recommendations of savings measures that the scrutiny sessions thought were least desirable. You can see that on page 48. I also think this approach showed our commitment to being open and transparent in the savings we take forward, as we published all of them rather than just publishing the list of the ones we decided to take. Now, thanks to that process, we can now act today to avoid the cuts that Cabinet and Scrutiny thought were the least desirable. Including in education, we can make less of a saving in the catering and cleaning budget and avoid a large cut in the money for music education. In social care, we can keep the night service for our extra care facilities and for vulnerable people living in their own homes. We can avoid losing social workers. We can avoid measures that would have impacted on delayed discharges. We can maintain support for foster carers and save a post in the family placement team. In neighbourhoods, we can avoid a double-digit increase in cemetery charges. We can maintain our grants to arts and cultural services like the Congress Theatre and the Museum, rather than imposing a cut on them. We can avoid charging for green waste collection. We can maintain winter maintenance levels, and we can prevent cuts in our valued street scene budgets. In communities, we can avoid making cuts to some third sector organisations and protect key services that help the young and the vulnerable. In the Chief Executive's Department, we can avoid closing cash offices, for example. We've listened to the priorities voiced by local residents as part of the engagement process for our new corporate plan. I hope members can also see the new priorities of the corporate plan shining through in this report, especially in section 8 at pages 49 to 51. On priority 1, investing in a cleaner, greener borough, we can invest £250,000 in the proposed system of local cleaning and greening teams resulting from the Neighbourhood Services peer review to help improve our local environments. We've also identified £1 million of extra capital funding to assist with road resurfacing. On priority 2, education, we can give schools a cash uplift of 1.8% and make permanent the £100,000 we assigned to school improvement as part of our efforts to improve standards. So despite having almost over £2 million less cash, we can still give almost £800,000 more to our schools. On priority 3, protecting the vulnerable, we have avoided making some of the least desirable cuts which would have impacted on the vulnerable, and we can also help social care with £750,000 to cover the increased cost for social care providers under the government's national living wage, to prevent social care having to make further cuts that would have impacted on vulnerable residents. Our corporate plan also commits us to being a responsible employer, so I'm proud to say that this budget means that we can implement the Living Wage Foundation rate of pay for all Torvine staff and pay the registration fees for our teaching assistants. As well as being the right thing to do by hard-working staff in areas like cleaning, catering, caretakers and staff who help run other local key services, this will also boost the local economy as these people spend their money locally. Of course, we also know that residents want us to keep the council tax rate as low as possible. We can therefore reduce the previously proposed increase in council tax to 3.95% to avoid a larger rise for hard-pressed local residents. This rise would represent an extra £3.61 a month for a Band D property. However, there is a balance to be struck here with safeguarding vital local services. Anyone calling for a lower rise would not be able to invest in schools, helping the vulnerable residents, or cleaning and greening in the way proposed in our budget. This budget shows clearly the value of a Labour government in Wales working with councils to help local services survive despite the difficulties caused by austerity from the UK government. The contrast could not be clearer with the situation facing many councils in England who are struggling to hold together the very fabric of local services as the rug is pulled from under their funding. Great credit must go to our Assembly member, Lynn Neagle, for being one of the first AMs to voice the cause of local government in the Assembly and ensure that local services like social care and education had an advocate in the Senate arguing for fairer funding. So this budget has taken some difficult decisions, savings in local services that we would not make out of choice, but have to do to make the budget balance. But this is a budget that, despite difficult financial times, shows our core values in action. A council investing in education, a council investing in social care services to protect the vulnerable, a council investing in a cleaner, greener local environment, a council that values its workforce, working in partnership with unions and paying at least the living wage to all employees, a council that listens to the priorities of residents and elected members, and a council that's working with the Welsh Government to protect our communities from the impact of austerity. I therefore move this budget and ask for your support in passing it today.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I'll now open the floor to members. Any questions or comments, members?
Can I, before you move to questions, compliment Anthony Hunt on that appraisal which he just given, which was second to none, and probably one of the best I've heard since I've been here. I also want to thank Nigel's team and all the departmental heads and chief officers for the work that they put into this budget. We've operated a different method of arriving at the budget this year than we've done in the past, via the workshops that we've held actually, and most members have attended those. So as leader, I'd like to thank all the members who have contributed to the budget process. I've had a very favourable comments back from the cross-party joint scrutiny sessions, which gave all members a chance to question officers and to have their say. I think you had more of an opportunity on this occasion than certainly I can remember in the past. I believe the budget before us today is all the better for that process. Times are not easy, but I look across the border at councils who are fighting to save the very fabric of local services. If we work together in this chamber and with the Welsh Government, we can stop that happening here. It will involve tough choices, and we've made some tough choices, and I compliment those councillors that have had the courage to make the tough choices. Because coming up here isn't all about, siding with popular opinion. Sometimes you have to make tough choices. And for those that have done that, I compliment you. For those that haven't, well then, you need to search your conscience. So there are no easy answers, but that's our job, and I commend the budget to you.
Thank you. It was moved, the budget. Did somebody second it? We didn't see a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Jessica Powell, please.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick comment. I mean, obviously, you know, we're again sort of in the least bad kind of budget, but I wanted to comment, I'll second everyone's comments on the change to the scrutiny procedure this year. It really worked a lot better. I think in previous years, where we've been in a full sort of council environment, we've tended to be waylaid by one particular popular issue, for example, a couple of years ago with lollipop ladies, and nothing else really got scrutinised. But I think this year, when we're looking at, you know, the changes that were made, you can see that we managed to get down in a lot more depth. And, you know, rather than just sort of having a knee-jerk reaction to one thing and focusing, you know, it really worked a lot better.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
I'd like to second my colleague. I obviously, the couple of years before, had to chair that, and it was so much better to be in a position where we had everybody taking part, and where some issues weren't popular, they got looked at. As said, 20 issues went back, whereas in the past, sitting in here, it was not a good process. So this was a much better process, and we got much more meaningful dialogue going, and I think people have listened. Plus the fact that, as Jess said, we got least best outcome, which I think is much better, and you know, it's led to this, which is, I think, is a much better budget.
Councillor Haynes.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Firstly, the Independent Group would like to thank the Chief Officers and all of the teams and staff for all their work with this budget. It has been appreciated. I'd also like to show our appreciation for the change from seminars to workshops. They were very thought-provoking and they were pretty challenging. And we also felt more involved in the process than ever before. I know that on the resources table it opened up some really hearty debates that were quite interesting. We continue to hear the blame culture of budget cuts being the fault of both Welsh and UK governments, but those elected to run this council are also under scrutiny, and difficult decisions have to be made, and we're all aware of that. Our residents, Torfaen and throughout the country, are seeing increased charges and fees, while some of the services they rely on are being reduced. And that's very difficult for both ourselves and our constituents to stomach. So we have a couple of questions and some comments. Some of the questions I'm not expecting answers for straight away, because they probably, you know, some work. I'm mindful that we have a gallery full of people waiting for the challenge. So the first one really, some of the mitigation options for social care are quite distressing, particularly the closure of one short stay unit and the reduction in respite to 21 days from 28. C and BS5, the commissioning and budget support, I've taken this out of the mitigation appendices. It states that there's £146,000 savings for service and transformation and restructure. Could we have via email, can that be elaborated on, please, so that we can have some more information? Very much the same question for HSG5 in housing, the £108,000. Could we have some more information on that? NBH1 Neighbourhood Services, out of hours contact direct to the contractor. That worries me a little bit, and I'm hoping that we have some monitoring in place so that, you know, we're not failing there. NBH3, the £50,000 reduction to street lights. We had a £50,000 reduction in that budget this time last year, and that really does concern me. NBH13, removal of 8 to 9 posts and resulting in full or part-time removal of some services. Can we just have some more details for that, please, via email? NBH24 libraries, proposed savings of 250,000. How is that being achieved, and are there any more closures proposed? PPP 8, reduction in staff in public protection. Can we have an absolute assurance, because I mean this is environmental health, etc. An absolute assurance that that isn't going to put anybody at risk. I'm very concerned about that. CEO 7, restructure the provision of democratic member services and mayoral support to include consideration of the removal of the mayoral car, chauffeur role, and the cessation of support for mayoral fundraising activities. When are we going to find out what part of that is included in the cut or not? Because it's very important for me to base my determination on this, on knowing more about that. CEO 8, stop by in the Western Mail and the Abergavenny Chronicle. Perhaps we should be stopping by in all newspapers. We're now online an awful lot. And just, the 3.95 council tax, again, is a difficult pill to swallow. And those are the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Is it possible to email those to Nigel, so Nigel could perhaps respond to you directly? Do you want to respond? Well, right, then come at the end. Okay, then. Councillor Thomas, then I've got... Oh, sorry, Nigel.
Just quickly, I mean, obviously when I have the questions, I will respond to all the answers in detail. But I just wanted to pick up on the one on NBH 13, the 8 or 9 posts. Duncan wants to work with members on that in terms of member priorities and therefore which services are not going to be provided, and then consequently which posts are going to be reduced. And I think he's going to be looking to use the scrutiny process to help inform him of that. So he's going to work with members on that. And obviously a couple of the savings you picked out, requesting further details, are in 2017-18 as well, so we can provide you with the information on that.
Thank you, Nigel. Right, I've got Councillor Thomas and Councillor Smith.
Can I thank Nigel for a very clear report on the budget? And after 10 years, Nigel, you are still looking quite good. 10 years of budget, you're wearing well. Can I just say how pleased I am that we have been able to support the Gwent Music Service. Music is a very important part of the school curriculum, and I'm very pleased. I'd just like to know what the arrangement the executive member is making to make sure that this service continues in the future, please.
Go on, Dave, do you want to answer if you want now?
As I've already reported back, when the issue first was raised, I have set up a meeting with our partners in this venture. We will be meeting on the 9th, which is Wednesday, I think, next week, in preliminary discussions, because there is a recognition right throughout Gwent that something needs to be done to rationalise this support. I think it is recognised again right throughout Gwent that it does provide a valuable service, and we should be doing what we can to continue that support. But as I've said, there is a universal recognition that the way in which it is funded at the moment isn't a rational way of going forward. And if we are genuine about sustaining the support for this programme, then we have to come to some conclusions and come to these conclusions very, very quickly. And I believe that next Wednesday, the 9th, will be the start in that process.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thanks so much, Mr Mayor. As usual, I congratulate Nigel Reedus, I congratulate Councillor Hunt for a very lucid and coherent presentation. I find myself seeing much good work in what is proposed. Inevitably, though, I have some criticisms. People would feel cheated if I didn't, I think. And people will then criticise me in turn, and I'd be shocked if they didn't do that either. The graph on the wall is quite interesting. Back in 2010, yes, we were running at about 45% of GDP was government spending, but that was when we were borrowing about £1 in 4, so that wasn't a sustainable place, a sustainable position to be in. the projection that we get down to the, what is it, 35%, something like that, that's the kind of percentage of GDP that we last saw in the 1997 to 2001 government. So there we are. I wouldn't use France, for example, as a good comparison because they haven't balanced a budget since 1973. So, yes, it's an interesting context, but I think we need to appreciate that does not tell the whole story. But it's entirely legitimate for Councillor Hunt to have a go at the UK government in terms of their grant to the Welsh government. I would do the same. And equally, it is appropriate for me to criticise the Welsh government, and it's quite neatly encapsulated on point 4.2 on page 40, where attention is drawn to the increased burdens placed by the Welsh government on local authorities, but without accompanying that with extra funding. So, you know, it's a two-way street, and any local authority is going to beat up on any tiers of government above them who are dishing out the money. So, you know, I can't criticise Councillor Hunt for criticising them. Sorry, I'm just ordering my thoughts. So, what I do approve of in the budget that's been proposed is there is serious attempts to improve the way the council does business. But what I say this year after year, and people get bored, I know. I remember sitting here in 2008 when we were warned of the public sector recession that was coming, and I think that an opportunity has been missed over a period of years. It's much better now than it was, but over a period of years to anticipate the way the direction the world was going in and to put in place earlier some of the measures that are now grudgingly being put in place. So, you know, none of us are perfect, but that is a criticism I make, and I think it's a legitimate criticism. For example, the use of workforce planning, asset management and the procurement strategy. Again, it's good that that kind of stuff is being done in a systematic way, but if only we'd been doing that 3, 4, 5 years ago, then we would be in a better situation. There would be more money for expenditure on policy priorities of the authority. So, in summary, and this will come as a shock to no one, I am sure, I'm not going to support this budget. I'm not putting a alternative proposal on the table, so it would be hypocritical of me to vote against, so I will be abstaining. I give credit where credit's due, but I think it is appropriate for me to criticise where I think criticism is due. So, no criticism to officers who do a good job, no criticism to Councillor Hunt, who's been here since 2012 and has moved things forward quite nicely. In fact, he's moved from this table over there, and without my glasses, I can't quite make out sometimes which is the leader's seat and which is the deputy leader's seat, but there we are. So, there we are. I'm sure that can be clarified. But there we are. So I made my position clear. I'm happy to be criticised by colleagues, but...
Thank you. Councillor Yule. Oh, sorry, it was Councillor Rees asked to speak next, then Councillor Yule.
So my words are directed to the Deputy Leader, really. There is an obligation to ensure that budget plans are fiscally sound, match the needs of the population with available resources, and are properly and efficiently implemented. An important issue here is that the budget setting process was largely completed before the new corporate plan was adopted by the Council, and that's a weakness. Therefore, I would argue that the Council hasn't been able to completely scrutinise the budget properly in terms of the corporate plan. Issues around affordability, for example, can council taxpayers on lower incomes afford the proposed increases in council tax? We haven't really looked at that. Prioritisation, the Council again looked at mitigation instead of thinking about redesigning the services and the way the services are delivered in a way to save money. I don't think we really had a go at that. Looking at value for money, the Council again hasn't clearly shown the link between the cuts and the outcomes for the service users that are affected by those cuts. I don't think that we had enough information to really drill down and find out what the actual result of our decision would be. Lastly, I am concerned around the process of scrutiny. I accept that it has improved greatly on previous years, but I still think we can go a bit further. In my view, we need a finance committee to meet on several occasions to fulfil a proper scrutiny role on the draft budget. I would expect the draft budget to be ready in the new year, and there will be a couple of months where we could have some intensive work by a small group of committee councillors to really drive up the quality of the budget and any changes in council tax. It will provide more, better, proper scrutiny for future budgets, which I feel that this one, although it has improved, we still can move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. Councillor Yoel.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. With regard to Jeff, the last speaker, I find it difficult to see a way in which the finance team and the current resources cabinet member and the work that they've done, yes, of course it can be improved on, but I'm sure that they could improve on it even better than this year without any extraneous imposition. I wouldn't be against necessarily the idea that you floated, but in defence of the system as it now stands, I think we've been well served, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. That leads me to a comment on about Graham Smith's comments. I've never ever ceased to be entertained by Graham's input, particularly into the budget debate, and there were some interesting points that he made, and I'm sure that we could all agree on that. But the one discordant note was Graham's insistence on going back and criticising something that might have been done earlier, 2008, 9, 10, so on and so forth. I think it's a bit of a sterile debate in many senses, Graham, because that time is gone and we have to concentrate on where we are now. I think the budget team, or rather the finance team, and my colleague Anthony Hunt have done a marvellous job again, and it makes me wonder in many ways what they would do in times of plenty, because they seem to be pretty expert in guiding us through the labyrinthine problems of austerity. And it just begs the question, would they be as good if there was plenty of money about? I suspect they would be. And this leads me to the last point. I would certainly agree with the budget, and as I've said before, that's hardly surprising since I played an instrumental part in it as a member of the Cabinet. And we were confronted with all sorts of proposals and counter-proposals that we have to sift through. I also congratulate the full scrutiny team. I don't necessarily agree with Jeff's mild criticism about the way in which it could be done better. Everything can be done better, but you only do that by experience and learn from experiences and move forward. I think this year was better than last year by a country mile, and this year it was better than last year by a country mile because you could almost feel the tension, you could almost feel the robust humour that they went about their business, and it was quite alarming on times. It's true to say, I think, this year, more than any other year, the budget process has been a team effort, because not only the finance team and Councillor Hunt, cabinet members and the full scrutiny team, which means everybody, every elected councillor should have had an input into this. So it begs the question, why on earth are people criticising it? Because they've had a handle on everything that we've done. The last thing I would like to say is this, and it's a mild criticism again of those, Liz and Graham, who suggested artfully perhaps that we are into this blame game of blaming the national government. I blame the national government, and I'm not ashamed to say that. National government have imposed the austerity process that we're all suffering under. The reason why we have the difficulties with our finances at the moment is because of the austerity programme of the Tory government. The one good thing coming out of this is that the finance team and Anthony Hunt, again, have produced a budget that confronts the austerity programme of the Tory government, and in so doing have broken the limitations, if you like, imposed by that austerity process. And for that they should be commended. So I hope we're not going to end up in a petty squabble over little issues because we can't think of anything else to find criticism with. I commend this budget. I thank Anthony for the hard work that he's put in, and no less Nigel Aurelius and the team. I think it's a damn good budget, and it should be applauded and it should be supported.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Okay, I'll try and come back at some of the points through there. Jess and Stuart mentioned scrutiny, and I welcome that. You mentioned it's more thorough, with everyone taking part and looking at issues, being more meaningful dialogue. as opposed to sort of set-piece speeches, and I think that was good. The Welsh Audit Office always asks us, of course, about outcomes with scrutiny. It's all very well to go through a process, but what's it changed? I think with this we can actually point to several things that it has actually changed. So I think that's progress. I'll come back later to some of the other points about scrutiny. Liz, I'd like to thank her for the recognition she said of the improved process. I'd recognise the point she makes about it's difficult for members of the public who see charges going up and services having to be cut. I share that frustration. It's something as a local resident myself. I think it is frustrating for people to see, but as long as, because only 13 or 14% of our money comes from council tax, as long as that situation keeps going on where, rightly or wrongly, our budgets are being cut centrally, then it's something we'll have to face. Lots of the mitigation options, as we've said before, aren't things that we're doing in an ideal world, and I look forward to the dialogue we can have in writing with some of them. I can assure her that we've already received assurances on issues like libraries and the public protection teams, that they will be done sensitively, and that they shouldn't involve closures. They'd be done in a way that would have the least possible impact on service delivery. Similarly, I think there's a discussion to be had there about the mayoral support and how that works going forwards. But there's a proposal in there, and members can discuss that in the future. On buying newspapers, that's something else that we can discuss going forwards. On to Colette's point, I think David's answered that really, but I was pleased too that we were able to support Gwent Music. I think Dave espoused very well the support that we have for the job that they do, but also the need to make things sustainable going forwards, given how difficult things are financially. Graham, thank you for your positive comments. I wouldn't want you agreeing with me all the time. It would probably affect my street cred. But on GDP and public spending, I was trying to make the point as un-party politically as I could do. I accept there's a need for the line to be going downwards. What I would question is the need for it to go down to 35%. I deliberately picked Germany as an example as opposed to France, but maybe we can have a discussion about that later. It's true that tiers of government always disagree with each other. I would emphasise, however, the impact of successive years of cuts have on councils of whatever colour. The point you make about increased burdens on councils is a valid one, and I think all levels of government have to have adherence to that table when they're putting new burdens on us. They have to recognise that they can't keep on doing that, whilst the amount of money that we have to deliver things is reduced. The point about, could we have done things earlier? Well, we're doing them now. The workforce planning, the asset management thing. So, that's all that we can do. I haven't got a time machine, so I don't know what to say about the point. I've only been here 4 years, and already you're saying I look like Bob, so never mind. I did come into local government to make myself feel young, not make myself feel older. On Jeff. Yes, the budget was completed in tandem with a corporate plan. I hope you can see very clearly the corporate plan built through this budget like a stick of rock. Obviously, now that plan's in place, it can inform things going forwards. So I would put that as a positive as opposed to a negative, but, we'll have to agree to disagree with that one. On council tax, I said in my contribution before, it is a very difficult balancing act for us to strike as councillors, but every penny less we collect in council tax is a penny less that can be spent on services. So I personally think we've got the balance about right. It's for other councils to make a sort of a decision about whether they feel they've got that right in their own areas. I don't think we're an outlier in any respects. Even I think George Osborne recognised in his budget the ability of council to put council tax up by 4% to protect services like social care. So I don't think, I'm not resorting to having to quote Chairman Mao to justify that one. The process of scrutiny, I agree it's something we can always build upon. We've tried to do more each year, and if he's got any suggestions in writing that he'd like to put to the scrutiny chairs, I'm never afraid of scrutiny. I'd encourage you to ask me tough questions as often as you want to do. That's your right as scrutiny members. But at the end of the day, Jeff has a job to do as an opposition member of the council. We have a job to do as an administration, and we're not always going to agree, but I agree that we can look each year to go further and further on scrutiny. David asked what we'd do in times of plenty. I sometimes daydream about what that would be like, but I don't think I'm going to get that any time soon. I think I was born 20 years too late for that. But certainly I think there's an argument that councils have got massively sharper over the last decade of dealing with straitened times. I would emphasise the point that he made about this being a team effort. We've mentioned scrutiny lots, but maybe we haven't mentioned other members of the Cabinet enough, because every member of the Cabinet went through, both with their officers and as part of Cabinet, line by line, trying to squeeze out the best possible settlement that we could get in this budget, and that's a credit to all of them. On national government and blame, look, there's a clear ideological difference at work here. Other councillors may disagree with me. I don't agree with the extent of cuts that are being imposed on public services from the government. I have tried to focus in the speech on what we can do to make a difference and not talk about that too much this year. But the point remains. I believe that local services are under pressure, not because of the actions and the decisions taken in council chambers, but of the actions and the decisions taken above our heads. And I would offer to show the impact of those decisions on politicians of any colour who come from central government. The decisions that are made about the funding of local services have a very real impact on both services and on the people who rely on them. And I think we need to try and balance the debate that goes on about that sometimes. But that's my personal view.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. If there's no more questions, members, I'll move to recommendations. Right then, the recommendations are on pages 34, 35, 36 and 37. Can I have a show of hands, please? Can I have 4? Against? And abstaining. Thank you, members. Right, the recommendations are agreed. Right, we go on to item 11, which is the pay policy statement. Chief Monitoring Officer, do you want to say a few words before we start?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd add a few words of explanation for members on the pay policy statement. You'll know that Council has to approve this every year. You're not being asked to make any decisions about payment for officers. It is about collating all the policies and the information we have regarding pay. This time last year, when you were asked to approve the pay policy statement, perhaps you'll recollect that the chief officers vacated the chamber. That was because there was a recent pay award, national pay award, that had been settled. There are no pay awards that have been settled as yet. So on that basis, there will be no change to the pay policy statement. And I don't see any justification in asking the chief officers to leave in these circumstances. But I would point out that the report is being presented by the deputy leader, and that's to alleviate concerns that chief officers should be presenting reports that involve their own pay. And also to recognise that it is important that you have officers here that are able to answer any particular questions, hence the presence of Graham Russell as head of HR. And that, as you'll see in the report, there may be occasions when revisions to the pay policy statement may need to come before you, at which point there might have been agreed national pay awards, and in those circumstances we can see whether probably then those would justify circumstances where chief officers would withdraw. So I thought, Mr. Mayor, that was useful to give that explanation to members about the circumstances regarding the forthcoming report. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Councillor Hunt, can you present this report, please?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just draw your attention to the report, agenda item 11, on page 285 on your agendas. Probably because you've heard enough of my voice today, I'll speak very briefly to present this report and to move the recommendations. I'd stress, first of all, that we're not asking members to agree anything new or to agree any pay awards. This is merely a statement of current practice that we are required as Council to deliver each year. In addition, we are now required to report to Council any appointments of officers above £100,000 or any exit packages for defined chief officers of more than 100,000. I can announce there were no appointments or packages that met those criteria this year. We are also required to report on the pay ratios between the average or median pay and our chief executive's pay, and the ratio between the average pay and chief officer's pay. You'll see the results at paragraph 5.3 of the report, and I'm pleased to say that our ratios have dropped during this council from 6.41 to 6.05 in one respect, and from 3.72 to 3.67 in the other respect, which is contained within the report. As you'll see at paragraph 5.4, these ratios are well below the maximums recommended in the Hutton Fair Pay report. Imminent changes such as the introduction of the living wage will undoubtedly improve things further, and together this shows our commitment as a council to fair pay and to keeping a firm grip on the balance between average pay and the pay of top officers. A further report will be likely later in the year when a national pay award is made and when we implement the living wage locally. Issues like this usually only get reported when things go wrong, which undoubtedly give people an unfair view of council officers nationally. In giving this report, I'd like to conclude by commending the hard work and diligence of all our staff. They are not, on the whole, highly paid. The average pay in this report is around £18,000. They work tirelessly to deliver the vital local services that people depend on. In recent years, they've seen their workloads increase and their numbers reduce. They have also had to put up with real terms pay cuts over several years and a public discourse, especially in certain newspapers, which unfairly castigates them. I reject that and hope as a council we can continue to work in partnership with our staff and their unions going forwards. So just drawing your attention to the recommendations which are on page 288 to 289, that the council approve the attached 2016 pay policy at Appendix 1 as an accurate summary of the council's current policy for the purposes of publication under the Localism Act. And I move that.
I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Members, any questions or comments? No? Right. But the recommendation is on page 289 of the agenda. We are asked to approve the pay policy statement as an accurate summary of the Council's current policy for publication under the Localism Act. Can I have a show of hands, please? 4. Thank you, members. That's unanimous. The recommendations are agreed. Now we go straight into item 12, member question time. There's one member's question for today. It's on the sheet that's been circulated. Councillor Rees, would you like to ask your question, please?
Diolch, Mayor. Please can the leader provide an update on the current status of the City deal?
Thank you, Councillor Rees. Discussions are continuing to take place between the Welsh Government, UK Government and local government leaders regarding the setting up of a Cardiff Capital City Region deal. Since the report to the Council Cabinet on November 2015, a tremendous amount of work has been undertaken in such a short timescale. I'm planning to hold a seminar to update all members as soon as possible, and we will probably get either all three or one of the three leaders that is taking the issue forward and is right in the middle of the discussions.
Thank you. For a supplementary, Councillor Rees.
I welcome that. I was hoping for a bit more detail, especially about what the three leaders have achieved, because I understand 2 weeks ago they were in Westminster and last week they were in Cardiff Bay. But just to follow up a little bit, one more, my supplementary is, at its cabinet, it's a little bit of a worry, at its cabinet meeting on the 25th of February, Newport Council members considered it was important for Newport to be recognised as an economic hub for the region. What is the leader doing to ensure that Torfaen is recognised as an economic hub for this region?
Well, the current deal is for the 10 authorities, and there is no one authority out of those 10 authorities that is in any different place than any of the others. So, I mean, what went on and what was said at the Newport Council, I'm not alive to. Different councils are doing everything. What I do know is that all councils have agreed on a template and also on the document that's going forward. So, to my knowledge, I don't know whether the Chief Executive can add to this, to my knowledge there is no difference. I think it'll all become apparent, and we'll have that seminar certainly within the next month, given the availability of either one of the three leaders or some of the three leaders, and you can ask them in detail then, and they'll give you a better answer than I can.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Rees. Right, we go on to item 13, which is the date of the next meeting. For your information, members, the next ordinary council meeting will take place on Tuesday, 12th of April 2016 at 10 a.m. in this chamber. Going to item 14, Cabinet Decisions, 9th of February 2016. Members, the Cabinet decisions start on page 317 of the agenda. There is one challenge to the decision about school reorganisation, which is on page 319. This issue will be dealt with later in the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Do members have any questions about the other decisions? No? Are you all okay to note the Cabinet decisions apart from the decision which will be dealt with by the Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee later? Right, thank you, members. Those decisions are noted. Item number 15, Cabinet Decisions, 23rd of February 2016. These Cabinet decisions were taken after the agenda was published, so they have been circulated separately from the agenda. There was no challenges to these. Do members have any questions about these decisions? No? Are you all okay to note them? Thank you, members. That's the end of the Council meeting. You'll have to have a recess now because the actual Overview and Scrutiny meeting is advertised for 12 o'clock, so we can't start beforehand. So 12 o'clock, we come back to the chamber, we'll start the meeting.